Welcome back. I'm making a PSX horror dungeon crawler game inspired by stuff like this. Watch the first video to see the stuff I made then. Let's go. Can it really be a dungeon crawler without secret rooms? No, it's a lore or something. Take a wall and make it thick. To help the player find secret rooms, we can add some visual clues to the wall texture. Have you ever played an old game and can instantly see something that can move because the lighting and colour are different to everything else? That's because lighting on moving objects was difficult to do and it would not always match. Modern real-time lighting fixes this, so to unfix this, I just made the texture a bit brighter. Add some lines to show scratches. Now you can kinda see the secret wall. Cut a brick out of this wall. Now you can also see one of the bricks sticking out a bit. Press it to open the wall. What other methods of finding secret rooms do you think would work well? More asset packs. More monsters. Big monsters struggle to walk because nav mesh issues. Having all the monsters spawn at the start of the game and move around is bad for performance. Just spawn them in when the player reaches a new floor. Add a collision box. When the player walks into it, delete monsters on the last floor and spawn monsters on the new floor. But now the system needs to know what floors are. Use the number, floor ID. Create a monster spawner blueprint and place them around the dungeon. Add floor ID to the spawners as well. Decide what monsters to spawn using the probability map. And set number of spawn chances for each monster. 0 means never spawn. Give only one monster a number and it will always spawn. Give 2 monsters 1 and it's a 50-50 chance. Now the monsters you fight each game are semi-random. Part about having the player use a portal to teleport between floors. Added this arch and portal effect. Player walks into the portal and freezes. Play this neat effect to hide the player getting teleported. Now the player is on a new floor and I can keep them separated for easier level design. One small slight tiny little problem. This feels terrible. Instead of one large dungeon you descend down, it feels like randomly entering a new dungeon and that's awful. Scrap the entire thing and just use stairs. You explore the dungeon to get loot, but why? Well, at the end of the game, you get scored based on how much loot you collected, but just collecting it is boring. You need a risk and reward system, so now the game has stores that appear at the start of each floor. Spend loot to get new gear that makes combat easier. Save all your loot for a higher score and risk dying and losing more. When you walk into a store, the amount of loot you have gets shown and items for sale are generated. Data table used to store all the items with information like name, price, stats and icon. Randomly selecting the item is bad RNG, so add some logic to select the items. To enable the system to work with a random number of store stands, one of them is designated as a parent and is given a reference to the other store stands in the store. When you enter the store zone, an event is called to the parent stand telling it to generate the items for sale. It checks how many other stands are in the store and generates that number of items. It then randomly assigns those items to the other stands and itself. Now you can see and buy items. But how does the stand determine what items to sell? When the function to generate items is called, first we go to the player and ask them how much health they have. If the player has full health, they won't need a healing potion. If they have less than full health, then have a percentage chance to add a healing potion. If the player is on low health, then we should add a healing potion. We can then ask the player how much loot they have and use that to decide if the cheaper or expensive healing potion should be added. If a healing potion is added, then we tell the stands that one of the item slots has been used. Now for each remaining slot, we run through another piece of code in a loop until all slots are filled. Equipment is sorted into categories, and using this we can randomly select the categories and add a unique item for each of them to avoid having a store filled with nothing but boots. Same as with the healing potion, we ask if the player can afford the item, then check to make sure the player does not already have the item. To simplify the selection, each item is given a tier level, and the store itself is given a tier level. Using this, we check if the item is the correct tier for the store to avoid higher tier items appearing early and low tier items appearing late. If all these conditions are met, then the item is added and the code runs again until all slots are filled. When a stand gets an item, it updates the icon and the displayed price. But now some information about the item needs to be shown to the player so they understand what they are buying. A floating box will work well. Create a widget and add all the stuff needed. Add some code to fill in the information. The 3D widget system allows me to show the widget in the world. Screen space has issues like this, so we use world space. Use a collision box to show and hide the widget when the player gets near. When you buy an item, this floating icon shrinks down and the price sign rotates to say sold. By using easing, I can adjust how the animation looks so it's not a rigid rotation. Add more props to fill out the dungeon, bookcases, beds, kegs and a bunch more. Asset pack came with these cobwebs, so put them into an atlas and make more. Randomly place them all over the dungeon for added detail. Added some wooden planks to block up door frames. Like the pots, you can hit and break them. However, this creates a new issue. Hit a pot and it breaks. Hit a wooden plank and it breaks. Hit a wooden barrel and it does not break. Player confusion on what can and cannot be broken. Need to either make everything breakable or add an indication on when something cannot be broken. Make a new blueprint for breakable props. Replace all small props in the game with breakable versions. Stacked props can float. How fix? Simple. Simulate physics and enable gravity. Now everything is broken. Use constraints so it only goes up and down and can rotate. If the player walks into it, this happens. Increase the mass so it's too heavy to move. Now you can run around smashing everything, just make sure the monsters don't hear you. Added a lantern using the player lighting system I built already. Issue is that the dungeon is already lit, so the lantern is not very useful. Played a Minecraft custom map called Dungeons of Fear by LGSC team. Player has a light and the dungeon is very dark apart from a few lights. Really liked this and it reminded me of games like Amnesia. Add a check to the light to override is lit or always on. Select every light and turn them off, then use a function to deselect 90% of them. Turn the selected lights on. Now the dungeon is super dark and the player lantern is useful. Increase the fog to make it darker. Played a game called Withered the Lost Dungeon by Nano. Shows readable documents as floating text. Looks cool. Already made something like this for the store, so easy to add. You click on the documents and text appears. Back away and it disappears. Remember to make the trigger sphere larger than the player's interact distance or it breaks. Add more traps. Saw blades. Spins fast. Moves back and forth. Remember to disable collision on it. Improve the arrow trap by adding particles when the arrow breaks. Arrow damage system broken, now the player is arrow proof. This might be a fun buff to add later. Pressure plate. Step on it to trigger traps like the tripwire. Got to add more variety to the game, so puzzle time. Figure out the symbol. Draw 8 unique symbols and ensure they don't fully cover each other up. Randomly select 3 symbols and stack them together. Add 8 levers and put the symbols above each one. Now you gotta figure out which 3 symbols are shown. Spike maze. 6x5 grid of spikes. Not possible to walk through without triggering them. Make 6 paths through the spikes and draw a texture to show it. Use tags to designate each path. Randomly select which path to use. Tell the spikes not to activate. Now you can safely get through the spikes. Add a lever at the end to disable the spikes so it's easier to leave. Pressure plates. 3x3 grid of pressure plates. Step on them to activate. Randomly select 3 of them and change the texture. Now you gotta step on those to solve. Add a light above each one and toggle the light when activated. Visual indication for which ones are active to make solving it easier. Internally, I've been calling this cartridge Carcone, but now it needs a proper name. Looking at the games that inspired it, a lot of them have lofty titles and multiple games in the series. I used a random word generator to slap some stuff together and got the title Echo Legends. I also liked Dungeon Abyss, and because it would be funny, decided that this is actually the 3rd game in the series. Echo Legends 3 Dungeon Abyss. Don't worry about the first 2, this is the best one in this series. The combat feels better and the story in the 2nd game was awful. So that's another devlog done. If all goes to plan, the next devlog will be the last one for this cartridge. Like and subscribe to see that video and be notified when this cartridge releases. I post on Blue Sky and have a Discord server. Buy the game on Steam and HRLs. See ya!